It was the second year of Iroku in Japan, when a group of farmers planting rice suddenly saw a cloud formation in the sky. From within the cloud, a dazzling light shone forth and incinerated everything. In the past, the land of the rising sun had been a world of humans, until undefined creatures called demons arrived and disrupted the peace. Famous warriors from the Warring States period fell one by one. However, to fight against the overwhelming dominance of these demons, small humans continued to persevere in battle. The only figures who stood against the evil demons were called the Demon Slayer Corps Bushiden. In the 151st year of Oniho, in Tatsuyama village, a demon worship ceremony was taking place. Demons were increasingly praised and appreciated by society, which made a certain boy grind his teeth in anger. At the mining training center in Tatsuyama, a red-haired boy named Musashi was wielding a pickaxe larger than himself, striking it against the hard brown earth. The loud sound of his pickaxe drew admiration from his friends, who praised the pride of their mining training center. A group approached the boy, asking about the legendary Rakshasa iron ore he had previously excavated. The purple-haired friend called him a master of rock excavation and had no doubt that Musashi would be the best miner of the year, truly a mining genius. Because people nowadays worship demons, those who slayed demons, called bushi, were increasingly ostracized and discriminated against. Sitting in class and listening to such teachings, Musashi's face turned extremely gloomy. He recalled his childhood with a small friend practicing swordsmanship in a yard covered with vast green grass. Two small boys with wooden swords striking back and forth, eventually sitting down on the green grass, panting and giggling with joy, their legs waving in the delight of swordsmanship. The boy Kojiro criticized Musashi's sword technique as boring as usual, while Musashi thought his friend's sword path was too meticulous. As the two children argued, Kojiro's father called them in to rest. These two young friends were taught that the Bushi demon-slaying warriors were the only existence standing against evil demons, and to defeat the evil demons occupying the beautiful cherry blossom country. Even now the Bushi continued to fight their hardest to reclaim the inherent freedom of that beautiful country. These teachings had stirred the small, passionate hearts of the two boys. Kojiro asked, would humans like them be capable of defeating monsters as huge as those in the paintings? After thinking for a moment, Musashi said, it's precisely because those monsters are so huge that the Bushi fight alongside their comrades every day. That's what's most wonderful. And so, the two children with passionate hearts and great ambitions promised each other that they would become Bushi and leave the town together to slay demons. Remembering that promise from years ago, Musashi suddenly smiled, and the bell signaled the end of class. The teacher didn't forget to remind them about the mountain inauguration ceremony and instructed them to follow what they had been taught, to help with all their might in service of the demons. The next day, in their final class, the teacher asked everyone to stand up and loudly declare their future dreams. Musashi decided that today he would say it all. He opened his mouth wide, but the words warrior only echoed in his mind and couldn't be spoken aloud. Musashi bit his lip, blaming himself for once again being unable to speak out. Carrying the oversized pickaxe on his back, Musashi walked with his face down, darkened, taking heavy steps, returning to the house where he and his friend had once promised to become Bushi. He adjusted his mood and stepped inside. Sitting in that small, dilapidated house was Kojiro, his friend from the wooden sword days. Musashi entered and asked his friend, got anything? Because I'm hungry. But Kojiro sent him back to the dormitory. Musashi asked if his friend had eaten yet. But Kojiro was worried that at the mountain inauguration ceremony, townspeople would be selling oil. That was also the reason Musashi had come to talk seriously with Kojiro today. Placing his demon-slaying sword, disguised as an oversized pickaxe, on the ground, Musashi reminded his friend of their childhood promise to leave the town together, form a warrior corps, and go slay demons. Contrary to Musashi's burning enthusiasm, Kojiro, a direct descendant of a samurai, had abandoned that promise. He was dissatisfied because his Bushi ancestors were the reason he was discriminated against in the village and lived in such a rundown place. Perhaps that was why, before closing his eyes, his father had made up a well-intentioned lie, as he had always thought warriors were heroes and demons were monsters. Musashi tried to make his friend understand, but Kojiro pointed out that Musashi himself no longer wanted to be a Bushi. Didn't you shout loudly in class every day that your dream was to be a miner? This statement immediately silenced Musashi. He tried to explain but couldn't find any reason to justify himself. Kojiro didn't give his friend time to explain. He rapidly fired questions about how he could trust Musashi. The person standing before him boldly said one thing but said something else at school. Kojiro didn't want to be deceived by someone who used his mouth to trick people around him, talking about dreams he had long abandoned. Those words struck Musashi like a slap across the face, leaving him speechless and increasingly surprised. Musashi trembled with anger and said he would prove to Kojiro that he was serious about his dream of becoming a bushi, then turned and ran out of the house. Kojiro slowly walked out of the house, whispering to himself the things he had hoped for his friend but couldn't say earlier. He hoped Musashi could truly live a decent life. After saying this, his gaze became distant. Kojiro, as usual, went to pick up trash in the town when suddenly a ball of paper flew at him, hitting him directly. It was those people again, playing and teasing him just because they recognized him as a demon slayer through the long blue sword he carried at his side. They even mockingly told him to use that sword to pick up trash. Since he was a tiny child, it was because of this sword that he was shunned and pointed at by his peers. Whenever the teacher lectured about the bushi, that little boy could only sit silently. After school, the boy would drag a heavy chain from the town to his home. Whispers of mockery and jokes surrounded the little boy, child of Bushi, descendant of Bushi. These words he had heard so often that he was used to them and no longer wanted to react. Looking at the demon statue in the distance, Kojiro said to himself, as if speaking to Musashi too, that they were different, completely different. In Kojiro's heart, he only hoped his brother would become a genuine miner because perhaps, fearing rejection by everyone, Kojiro didn't want his friend to go through the same experience. Elsewhere, Musashi was still angry about what Kojiro had said. He gritted his teeth as he struck his pickaxe into the ground, justifying to himself that his dream of becoming a demon-slaying warrior was completely serious and he would prove it to Kojiro. The sun appeared behind the high mountain peak, and the mountain inauguration ceremony began. Amid the excitement and laughter of the townspeople and the group from the mining training center, only Musashi had a frowning, angry face, drooping as he recalled Kojiro's words, constantly questioning whether Kojiro really thought of him that way. The group from the mining training center went to the Demon Gate Shrine and continued up the mountain. At the highest point of the shrine, a gatekeeper told them that the demon lord was inside. The friends were excited about meeting Lady Nekomata, the cat demon. Only Musashi had the thought of slaying whatever demon was sitting behind that gate to prove his determination. The gate opened, and the place they called a paradise workplace made the whole group disillusioned. As soon as they entered, they witnessed a demon using its long, sharp claws to grab another worker, turning him into breakfast. This scene made the friends tremble uncontrollably. Before they could gather their thoughts, a group of people approached to introduce their paradise workplace. Bare-backed humans working hard and painfully, digging stones for demons. Some turned into demon meals. Those who couldn't work were beaten with canes, and a long line of people carrying excavated stones to offer to the demon lord. Looking at the cat like monsters bullying and devouring small human lives, the young men sitting fearfully on the ground realized they had been deceived all along. But Musashi had anticipated that these demons were indeed monsters. Stepping forward, he pointed at the demons. This was his first step toward reaching his dream. He shouted that he was a swordsman of the Kanmaki school and charged at the demons, forgetting that his sword had been confiscated for what the gatekeeper called purification before entering the shrine. Hearing Musashi's words, the demon lord in the distance bulged with muscles, transformed into a true demon, and growled. Musashi scanned the area and spotted a pickaxe lying at the feet of the demon that had belonged to the unfortunate worker who became its meal. He ran forward, dodged the demon's claws, and grabbed the pickaxe. Back in the small house, Kojiro was gazing at his shining sword, thinking about demon slaying. The image of a tiny Musashi holding a wooden sword appeared before his eyes. He questioned what he was doing and promised himself not to let Musashi get caught up in the bloodline of the Bushi. Looking at the floor, Kojiro noticed his friend's school bag, left behind in his hurry. Picking up Musashi's notebook to look at it, Kojiro was astonished by what was written inside. Meanwhile, Musashi was fighting with the demons and being fiercely attacked. His minor friends tried to persuade him to obey the gatekeeper and the demon lord, warning that he would be killed otherwise. But Musashi remained stubborn because, to him, slaying demons was the responsibility of a Bushi. Another friend wondered why slaying demons was the responsibility of demon-slaying warriors. Weren't they just miners? This question made the blood-pumped Musashi suddenly pause, questioning why he had been hiding his true dream. Then he was punched by the demon and thrown far away. It was because he had hidden his true dream from everyone that Musashi had lost Kojiro's trust. As he thought this, he charged at the demon, but another punch from it made him cough blood. Yes, he didn't want to deceive people, but if he told the truth, he would be scrutinized, so it was better to hide it as he was doing now. But wasn't Musashi also deceiving himself? Thinking this, he shouted, grabbed the pickaxe, and charged straight ahead. Beaten black and blue, he still couldn't stop thinking. Was it because he didn't want to be isolated, didn't want to be separated from his friends, that he had been swept along with those around him, and thus lost the most important thing? After a struggle, the small, blood-covered body of the 15-year-old boy, holding a broken pickaxe, hung motionless on the demon's claws, making his friends weep. One of the leaders, with cunning eyes, asked him how his dream becoming reality felt. Wasn't the dream he had been taught at school that serving the demon was an honor just a lie? Musashi, hanging from the claws, finally moved. He shouted that his dream was to be a bushi. The demon's claws lunged forward, and it seemed he would lose his life there, but no. A motorcycle crashed straight into the fierce demon's head. With eyes full of anger, Musashi saw the person riding the bike, and his eyes showed joy. It was Kojiro, riding the demon's steel rider Takesha. The bike stopped, leaving Musashi bewildered. Kojiro threw Musashi's demon-slaying sword and training book to him, demanding to know if what he had written in the notebook pretending to dig rocks to train in swordsmanship was true. Musashi's reply was an affirmation, as if it was an obvious matter. Musashi understood that Kojiro was right not to trust him because he was a boaster. The leader shouted, demanding the death penalty for them because Kojiro was harboring a demon steel rider and forcing them to participate in the blood festival. The angry demon, surrounded by red energy, stood up. Kojiro still didn't believe his father's words that demons were real. As for Musashi, despite being injured, he felt very excited. He would prove to Kojiro that he was truly serious about becoming a bushi. Musashi pressed the tip of his sword into the ground, alarming his minor friends because doing so would make it impossible to draw the sword. Then Kojiro suddenly remembered Musashi's drawings in the training notebook that had fallen behind them. The ground was the sword's sheath. The demon lunged forward, raising its claws toward Musashi. Using the ground as a sword sheath, Musashi performed the Rakshasa circle slash, creating the Kanmaki single-minded sword drawing technique. Musashi jumped high, his sharp eyes aimed directly at the monster as he struck downward. The blade rose from the ground and ended on the ground. Satoshi's complete slash split the monster in two, to the surprise of the samurai descendant Kojiro and the leader. The other demons also transformed, becoming more muscular. Kojiro drew the sword at his side, ready to fight. The two fought side by side while talking. Musashi expressed that it wasn't because he was afraid to slay demons alone that he invited Kojiro, but because he genuinely didn't want the demon-slaying warrior corps to have just one person. From now on, at least the two of them were in the corps, and in the future, they might fight demons together until death, adventure together, and conquer the highest peak. At that time, he would surely need someone to share that joy with him. These words from Musashi struck Kojiro's heart, making him freeze in place, unaware of a bloodthirsty demon charging from behind with 2 consecutive slashes. Because of this, the demon lost its life. Musashi said that eating alone didn't taste good anymore. Without Kojiro, he would feel bored to death. Kojiro suddenly remembered the image of 2 wooden swords clashing when they were small and how they had smiled and been happy whenever they were near each other. Musashi extended his hand toward Kojiro, wanting to reach new heights together. Still surprised by the heartfelt words, Kojiro took a few seconds to respond with an "uh-huh." Before they could say more, the ground shook, making them both stagger. At the mountain peak, a red beam of light shot straight into the sky, with clouds swirling around. The leaders continuously waved their purification staffs, Gohei staffs, trembling and saying, "Lord Kishin, the demon god, is coming." All the cat demons also raised their hands to the sky as if awaiting something great about to arrive. Musashi was still wondering what a demon god was. Was it the biggest-faced demon among those earlier, or the leader of the demon world? Ayuri rushed forward to fight the masked figure, but was repeatedly injured by him. Just like when they were little, Kojiro criticized Musashi's boring techniques, while Musashi criticized his friend's meticulous sword plays. Saying this, the 2 boys stood there, their faces ready to face the terrible thing that was coming. The only existence against evil demons that was the demon-slaying warrior. The red light surrounded an object shaped like an egg, which slowly descended, parting the earth. The energy continued to radiate intensely. The 2 boys stood firm as pillars, determined to slay demons together. The demons, emboldened, continued to rampage throughout the mining area. Kojiro and Musashi rode on the demon Steel Rider, slashing through the cat demons along the way to the distant hilltop. Standing behind the saddle, Musashi was overjoyed that he could finally accompany Kojiro in fulfilling their vow from 5 years ago. In contrast to Musashi's cheerful and excited mood was Kojiro's face full of contemplation. With a cold, Musashi sensed something unusual. Kojiro tried to refuse to speak, but as Musashi kept pressing, he had to open up. Thinking carefully, it was true that Kojiro had always wanted to leave the town, but the feeling of wanting to establish a warrior corps and becoming a demon-slaying warrior he had forgotten that long ago. Musashi was surprised and tried to persuade him. Use that long sword and join forces with me to rise up. Kojiro, still with a solemn voice, told Musashi that the sword wasn't as wonderful as he thought. But Musashi continued trying to motivate his friend. About to say something more, Kojiro realized they had reached the source of the red light from earlier. On the hilltop was some sort of red fiery demon thing, shaped like a chick, but with gray legs and no wings. The demon god looked like a small red cylindrical mass with legs, completely different from Musashi's initial imagination. Kojiro reminded his friend standing behind him not to be careless, then drove the demon Steel Rider close to the demon god. With just 2 strikes, Musashi split that form in half, and the bike braked. Kojiro had some doubts, could everything end so quickly? Then a long pinkish-purple tentacle appeared from somewhere, embracing the lower half that had just been cut, and completely reviving it, leaving Musashi bewildered. He was still wondering how to destroy that demon when he saw in the distance 2 leaders and 2 miners running toward them with offerings for the demon on a cart. The demon turned, pointing its sharp-clawed feet toward the cart to grab the offerings brought by those people. A great force broke the cart in half. The demon god devoured handful after handful, then howled with pleasure. Having filled its stomach, the demon god shuddered, its red fur stood on end, a dark light emanated, and the demon god shed its skin. A face appeared through the smoke, its size increasing dizzyingly, the ground bursting and smoke billowing. The demon god, which had been as small as a chicken, had now become a real demon that was the flame hell celestial dog in Goku Tengu, with a hollow face resembling a spinal column. Death itself had appeared. Musashi jumped onto Kojiro's demon Steel Rider, and the warhorse took off. Each footstep of the demon god, with the power to flatten Mount Tai, blew away the 2 boys. The red demon flexed, and after a roar that shook heaven and earth, 4 more arms grew from its back. The people kneeling on the ground repeatedly bowed their heads, begging the demon god to calm its anger. Even the leaders clasped their hands in supplication because it had been 5 years since they had seen the demon god appear in its true form. The demon joined 2 hands in front of its chest, while the other 4 hands supported the halo of light above its head, an imposing posture radiating the power and divine nature of an evil demon. Kojiro, with his sword planted in the ground, trembled as he struggled to stand after the demon's angry stomp like a raging whirlwind. Dazed before the immense size standing before him, Kojiro assured himself that with a demon god that big, he was completely bound hand and foot. Turning to call Musashi with the intention of telling him to retreat, he realized his friend was lying on the ground, breathing with difficulty. Turning back and forth, right in Kojiro's face was the breath and face of the demon god. It roared once and opened its mouth as if to eat him. Kojiro raised his sword to fight back, but was lifted high by its claws. Kojiro watched the demon god's actions, guessing whether the demon wanted to be slashed again, when the reminders from the miners who had brought the offerings earlier confirmed his thoughts. They screamed, advising him to throw away his sword to save his life. Kojiro appeared very surprised, then gritted his teeth, looking at his sword and realizing that he himself could be eaten by the demon god. At this moment, Musashi struggled to stand up, straining to call the name of his childhood friend. It seemed the demon god wasn't much interested in Kojiro. What it wanted was the sword of the demon-slaying warrior. Its nails gripped the blade tightly, shaking it back and forth to throw Kojiro off. But he absolutely refused to let go, using his small body to embrace the sword. The stubbornness of the 15-year-old boy angered the demon god. It threw both him and the sword against a nearby rock, but Kojiro still wouldn't let go. The miners couldn't understand why Kojiro cared so much about the sword, nor did they understand what he was thinking. Meanwhile, Musashi watched his friend being tortured and gritted his teeth, his eyebrows furrowed tightly. A loud noise rang out as Kojiro's entire body was once again slammed to the ground like a toy, then dragged across the ground. his face clearly showing discomfort and pain. Since childhood, Kojiro had always thought, what was the point of keeping such a sword? He had hated the sword so much. He had always felt sorry for himself in the classroom, tears welling up, not understanding why his family had to be demon-slaying warriors. His father's call had awakened the little boy who was holding his head with tears in his eyes. In the small house, his father told him an interesting story that demons were monsters and had nothing good about them, and the only existence to fight against them was their ancestors. Seeing his little son with red cheeks and lowered face, Kojiro's father apologized for making his son inherit the bloodline of demon-slaying warriors, causing people to discriminate against him. However, the father, with kind eyes, wanted him to know that the adults in this country had abandoned their pride. While there were people who gave up fighting against demons, only warriors continued to silently fight to reclaim the world for humans. Placing a hand steady with belief on his small son's shoulder, the father gently continued to affirm that this was the way of life for a warrior. Kojiro, he wasn't trash as people often said. He was a son, a grandson of a family full of courage and overflowing with pride, and he must not forget that. That's right, Kojiro had always wanted to throw away that sword. But remembering his late father's words that the sword was the pride of a warrior, if he abandoned it, something precious within himself would feel lost, so he would rather die than absolutely let go. Eyes wide open, hands gripping the blade tightly, blood gushing out, the demon god held Kojiro down with one hand, pulled the sword out with the other, and tossed him away like dusting off dirt, then swallowed the sword into its stomach. While two miners ran to check on Kojiro's health, he was still dazed after witnessing his sword being swallowed by the demon god. The voice, instructions, and image of his respected father appeared in his mind. His hand unconsciously tightened, finger marks imprinted on the ground. Kojiro shouted with fury, and suddenly Musashi rushed from behind, crawling step by step onto the demon god before the curious eyes of everyone. Identifying the exact position with his sword in the form of an oversized pickaxe, Musashi struck hard at the demon's stomach, just as he used to do at the mining training center. The powerful pickaxe struck right in the middle of the rigid stomach, causing the demon god to cry out in pain. Musashi continued to rain down blow after blow, striking and dodging, luring the demon god to punch its own stomach. A fatal hit created a hole in the belly, and the demon god fell backward. Musashi stood on the edge of the island, then fell into the smoking gastric juice of the demon. Kojiro worriedly ran over, calling Musashi's name. Thinking his friend had lost his life for him, Musashi emerged from the gastric juice with the sword. Musashi walked over, smiling, returning the dropped item to its owner. Receiving back his sword, Kojiro, teary-eyed, expressed his thanks. Musashi smiled and advised, "Friend, don't lose it again." This statement once again stirred Kojiro's subconscious about his childhood, about his late father's instructions. That's right, that sword was the pride of those who carried the bushy bloodline like him. Only by gripping that sword tightly could he feel authentic. This time, Kojiro had determination and motivation. Raising their swords high, Musashi and Kojiro fulfilled their promise from years ago. Together they would establish the strongest demon-slaying warrior corps, and eliminating that red demon would be the first achievement to record for the warrior corps. As they took the first step to accomplish this important task, the silence was broken when the leaders shouted a warning about an attack from the Fleet Warrior Corps from another direction. Kojiro and Musashi ran to a high platform to observe. They were surprised, their eyes wide open at the sight of an entire building designed like a tall temple moving. From inside the temple, a group of people with advanced equipment rode demon steel riders flying out from that direction. Under the command of the leader, they simultaneously used their swords to break through the shield created by the demon. With a majestic appearance and blue badges on their chests, they were the Taikta Warrior Corps. A small group stopped in front of the demon's body lying on the ground, simultaneously drew their swords, and flew up. While both Musashi and Kojiro were stunned and surprised at encountering a real warrior corps, a sudden call made both boys turn their heads to see who it was. Hearing them call him a kid, Musashi jumped up and proudly showed off his achievement, the hole dug in the red demon's stomach. Hearing this, the warrior burst into laughter and pointed at the lying demon. That's right, it was those tentacles again. They spread in all directions, and the demon revived as if there had never been a large hole in its body, to Musashi's astonishment. The strange uncle approached, patted the young, inexperienced friend who had fought demons for the first time, comforting him and telling him to hide in a safe place. They would help him deal with the demon, then turned back to direct evacuation for the workers in the mine. Kojiro also came over, trying to call his friend who was standing like a statue to evacuate together. But Musashi's eyes were now fixed on the increasingly powerful transforming demon in the distance. The entire body of the fierce demon spewed red fire that was strongly spreading around. Kojiro was still trying to use words to pull his stubborn friend to evacuate, to obediently retreat, but it wasn't effective. So that was their first achievement. And it was about to be stolen by another group. That precious achievement. Thinking about it made him angry. Musashi went straight to where the fire-breathing demon was, despite Kojiro's objection. Because this was the realization of both their childhood dreams. Perhaps this was the real reason why Musashi was willing to trade, to put his life on the line to secure this first achievement. Standing on a higher area, the white-haired friend praised Musashi, a miner full of vitality. But his messy sword technique, although mixed with a bit of orthodox swordsmanship from some school, quickly made him realize that Musashi was not a real warrior. The conversation was interrupted when the leader stepped forward. They quickly reported that they had found a suitable position and were ready to take down the flame jewel Tengu. The noise below attracted the leader's attention. He realized that Musashi was the kid he had patted on the shoulder earlier and directed to evacuate. While observing the boy below, a friend approached to remind the leader that he had shown his face too much and didn't need to direct evacuation. Just leave the Aki farmers alone. The leader removed the heavy mask on his head, denying his friend's thought. Because for him, if none of the people working in this mine could hold on to the thin thread of life, then demon slaying would no longer carry its traditional meaning. Reclaiming the world for humankind from those monsters was the real mission and meaning of being a warrior truly worthy of being the leader of Taikta. The people around praised Naotora's noble thinking, but only the friend from earlier sighed and hoped that demons would not take the leader's life because of his naive thinking just now. Finally, the destination of the three was a deep pit with 4 floating rocks. A fool has something that, even if he puts his life on the line, he can't pass on. He didn't hate them. Having said that, Naotora turned back to tell his core to prepare the blue sky crane wing to destroy the demon. Musashi, with eyes burning with frenzied determination, rushed in to slay the demon god. Hearing the mockery directed at Musashi from the leaders standing on the observation platform and looking at the giant demon before him, Kojiro disappointedly thought that he was nothing like Musashi. Meanwhile, the red-haired friend jumped forward to strike the demon. The pieces of skin that had just been broken apart were once again wrapped by those tentacles and revived exactly as before. While he was pondering how to take down the demon, a blue rope wrapped around him and pulled him back toward the Taikta headquarters. Musashi looked for a moment and realized that Naotora was the person who had earlier told him to evacuate. He angrily shouted, demanding to be released. Looking at the child, whom he considered a snotty-nosed kid, talking about his first achievement, Naotora asked Musashi what he wanted to do. Hearing Musashi's bold reply that risking his life for his dream was obvious, the leader decided he couldn't let a reckless kid charge into the battlefield. Despite Naotora's warning, Musashi remained stubborn and was taught a lesson by the leader, who showed him the harsh reality. Over there, Mr. Masamune was also dressed formally, not the kind of opponent that Musashi could defeat alone. With Musashi's strength and lacking rationality, Naotora advised him to forget about his dreams and abandon demon slaying, which surprised the boy. Thinking that Musashi would realize how difficult it was to defeat the demon on his own and give up, the reality was the opposite. Ignoring the warning that if he deliberately escaped from that special binding rope, he would be injured, Musashi flexed and broke the rope, then rushed down to the battlefield to everyone's astonishment. Watching the 15-year-old boy run to the battlefield, the leader smirked, deciding to let Musashi do whatever he wanted and not catch him again. It seemed the young boy's determination was genuine, and if he truly had something in his heart that made him put his small life on the line rather than yield, then Musashi was truly a real demon-slaying warrior. Kojiro stood watching Musashi rushing headlong into danger, still standing there wondering what he could do. Hearing about the sword technique, blue sky crane wing, being prepared and aimed at everyone, the leaders scrambled away, not daring to stay even for a moment. Musashi still risked himself running close to where the Taikta warriors were performing their sword technique, despite the shouts from those above telling him to stay away from that place, or he would be caught in their technique. In Musashi's head, he didn't care about those words anymore. He had been deaf to their advice from the beginning. He had once followed those around him and run away from his dream, so he would not be a turtle retracting its head again, making himself feel inferior. Stopping at a suitable distance, he tightened his grip. facing the demons spewing deadly smoke. The image of Satoshi swinging his blade resembled the late warrior, Kojiro's father. The ground cracked, and Musashi performed the Kanmaki school's single-minded great blade killer technique. Light like red streaks emitted, trailing each other, pointing in different directions from Musashi's sword strike to the ground. The ground cracked and broke into rocks rolling down from above, causing a group of warriors trying to block the demon god to become disoriented. The blue sky crane wing was fired, but because Musashi had loosened the demon god that was being fixed in place, he inadvertently helped the demon god dodge the fatal blow. Musashi followed the large rocks, jumping toward the demon god that was falling backward on the ground. He suddenly remembered the leader's words, telling himself that he would accomplish what he thought and was determined to do. So he would be determined to finish off the demon god before the Taikta warrior corps. Kojiro's call awakened Musashi from his scattered thoughts. It turned out that Kojiro hadn't fled. He had grabbed some of the leaders and found the vital point that could help Musashi destroy the demon god its horn. Following the guidance of his comrade who had been by his side since childhood, Musashi aimed straight for the horn and made his move. Kojiro shouted loudly, warning Musashi of the danger in front of him. The demon was exhaling deadly power. Just when Musashi thought he was going to die, Naotora stepped forward, pushing him behind, acknowledging his determination and saying to leave the rest to experience people like them. And with a finishing blow to the dark red demon, the flame jewel Tengu was dying. Musashi was frustrated. This achievement should have been his and Kojiro's, but perhaps the Taikta warrior corps also had things they couldn't yield, just as he had stubbornly rushed to fight the demon god. One laughed, one was annoyed. Naotora carried the horn away, not forgetting to remind Musashi to be careful as the demon god's body would gradually disappear. The warriors simultaneously raised their weapons, pointing directly at that light. To Musashi's question, the leader informed him that they were absorbing the demon god's power. In contrast to the joyful mood of the Taikta warrior corps were the two friends in a far corner, frustrated because their first achievement had been stolen. Kojiro asked Musashi if the scene before them seemed familiar, making Musashi suddenly remember the painting in the scroll depicting the warrior corps. Looking at the people eagerly thanking the warriors, Kojiro's eyes welled up with tears as he realized that the existence of warriors was the only thing against the demons. Warriors were not bad people, and the story his late father had told him was true. The leaders were bound in a circle and brought before the hall. The Taikta leader, Naotora, stood before the hall, boldly vowing to eliminate all demon gods and return the world to humans. A leader mockingly said they would see if warriors like them could continue to spout what they considered nonsense. Over the past 150 years, demon gods had continuously increased in number and become prosperous. Only people like warriors opposed them uselessly, fighting barehanded. How many people had sacrificed their lives in vain, and even those without weapons had been implicated. Yet the warrior corps once again raised that unrealistic dream. Were they trying to push everyone into a deep pit of despair? Before these mocking words, Naotora didn't care much because he had grown up with such harsh words. In his warrior corps, there were many types of people, each carrying a dream. Aspirations and concepts differed, but the common point between them was never giving up on dreams. Inheriting the names that had once inherited sword techniques, they had reached today by inheriting the swords of their fallen comrades, the demon-slaying warriors, holding a great source of power in their hands. The entire warrior corps raised their swords high, shouting together, determined to reclaim a future where humans no longer had to tremble before creatures of unclear identity and origin. While Kojiro was excited, as if receiving a lot of motivation, Musashi was gritting his teeth, frustrated and unable to accept the reality. Naotora was looking in their direction. Kojiro stepped forward to introduce them, and Naotora politely apologized. Two contrasting images coexisted in one frame, a Kojiro calmly talking and a Musashi uncomfortably gritting his teeth, his mouth twitching. Another member of the corps patted his head and reminded him that slaying demons was the common duty of warriors, so if there was competition between them, it wouldn't be good. Indeed, looking at everyone around who was so happy, Musashi decided to suppress his emotions and turned to walk away. The leader approached to pat his head and teased him, causing his emotions to explode directly. Other members reminded Musashi that he should thank the leader, which ignited the emotions he had been trying to suppress. Musashi roared like an out-of-control gorilla, bitter about having his achievement stolen. The leader also realized that Musashi had been paying attention to the emotions of those around him, which was why he had suppressed his dissatisfaction until now. because in the recent battle, he had used a lot of courage. Having his efforts stolen like that would inevitably make him feel bitter. Having said that, the leader pulled something out of his chest pocket, something that looked like a sparkling purple diamond, and put it around Musashi's neck, not forgetting to taunt him, saying it was an incentive reward for someone who didn't slay the demon, accompanied by a seemingly forced smile, and then shaking hands with him, making Musashi even more bitter. From morning until evening, he was still angry, shivering and shouting in frustration. Meanwhile, Kojiro held the diamond, looking it up and down, curious about what it was. Musashi jumped down from the bed, snatched the object from Kojiro's hand, and recognized the seal of the Eki people. About to smash the stone, Musashi suddenly realized something, brought his eyes closer to look inside, thinking it was a kaleidoscope. Looking at Musashi's stance, Kojiro suddenly felt familiar with it, and opened the scroll about the warrior core to look. They realized it was a tool to help find demons. Moreover, the pattern on the scroll was also similar to the one in the kaleidoscope. In one corner of the scroll, there was also an image of a warrior flying up with a sword, similar to what someone in the warrior core had used that morning. Reading the poem next to the scroll, Musashi saw the names of more than 100 demon gods, including the flame hell Tengu they had encountered that morning. There were so many demon gods. Perhaps this was Musashi's opportunity to make up for the stolen achievement today. The passionate call and dream of being renowned throughout Japan and unifying it made Musashi realize what the Takedo warrior had said. Running straight to where the Takedo warrior core was, he shouted out the dream that the leader cherished. It was the dream of unifying Japan that no one had been able to achieve in 150 years. Musashi boldly declared that if no one had been able to do it, he would do it. Eliminate all the turtle demons, powerful monsters, or the demon gods with the power to crush everything. Looking at the boy standing below, the leader just smiled and issued a challenge. Try it. Standing before the large red village gate, Musashi was both excited and curious about the world beyond that door. Behind him, Musashi's friends from the mining training center came to say goodbye and wish him a safe journey. The gate opened, and Kojiro and Musashi rode on the demon steel rider, going outside for the first time to look at the vast world and their tiny town in the distance. Musashi was grateful to Kojiro's father for teaching them swordsmanship. Otherwise, he would probably just be a miner digging earth in that tiny town far away, with no dreams at all. High mountains and vast skies. By the stream, a little girl was sitting with her feet in the water, playing, with large round eyes and a small smile on her lips, implying something profound. On the first day out of town, the two young friends were still excited and promised they would definitely achieve their first feat. On the first night, they promised each other that no matter what happened on this journey, they would remain harmonious. On the second night, when there was only one handful of rice left, Musashi split it in half with the motto of harmony. He was then seated next to the sect leader. By evening, having eaten all the food in the previous 2 days, the two friends went to sleep hungry that night, but their mouths still murmured about being harmonious and not arguing. By the fourth day, with hungry stomachs and the demon steel rider out of gas, the two friends wearily pushed the bike along, still murmuring that they must be harmonious and not quarrel with each other. Hunger made Musashi irritable. He blamed Kojiro for not bringing enough food. Kojiro gently explained that since his father's death, he had been self-sufficient, so he had a special kind of power, the power of survival. Looking at the pile of fish that Kojiro had just gently caught, Musashi's eyes widened and his mouth gaped. Kojiro, while fishing, didn't forget to show the face of a winner, taunting his friend who was standing there without having caught any fish, which made Musashi grind his teeth, grab a rod, and start fishing. As soon as Musashi left, Kojiro sighed, questioning himself about what he was doing, blaming himself for being useless and inferior. Suddenly, he looked to the left, and a large figure made him jump. Musashi sat in a corner, unable to catch any fish, thinking about why they were arguing over food. Then, Musashi decisively stood up, went back to Kojiro to apologize, and wanted to have lunch together. But he couldn't find his friend anywhere. Moving a bit closer, Musashi was shocked to see his friend lying face down on the ground, with a long red mark on his face as if he had been slashed. Suddenly, from behind, a little girl pounced on Musashi, pinning him to the ground. While Musashi didn't understand what was happening, the girl handcuffed his hands behind his back, demanding all his money and the fake demon steel rider. Musashi turned his head to glance at the friend sitting on his back. Fighting this friend, he probably wouldn't even need to use his sword. With the strength of a skilled miner, Musashi easily stood up, throwing the girl off. After a fight, Musashi realized this girl wasn't an ordinary person. But how could a light and small girl like that slash Kojiro? She couldn't win by fighting. The friend tried to use feminine charm, but it didn't work on Musashi because, as a minor, he had been specially trained. Now he understood how this small body had managed to slash his blonde friend who was sprawled on the ground. Seeing that she couldn't continue playing, the girl rolled up her sleeve to reveal something that looked like a dangerous weapon. But before she could strike, a horn sound from somewhere rang out, frightening her. Saying she was borrowing it, she actually stole Kojiro's demon steel rider and sped away. Having lost the bike, Musashi and Kojiro decided to chase after her to get it back. She drove straight to the residence of the Kosemdo warrior corps. The friend opened the door, apologizing to the master standing in the room for her delay and reporting that she had stolen the bike from 2 warriors outside the city. So the person laughing in the room was the leader of the Kosemdo faction, Lord Kosemdo Hideo, and that little girl was a member of that warrior corps, named Tsugumi Hattori. In another development, Musashi and Kojiro, holding grilled fish and eating messily, chased after her and stopped in front of the gate of the Kosemdo warrior corps. After a while, a servant came to request that the sect leader follow him to answer some questions. With an attitude that was a complete 180-degree turn from earlier when they welcomed them to the warrior corps, he invited the 2 to follow him. The 2 friends walked, reminding each other to be cautious. Stepping out of the dark corridor, Musashi was immediately stunned by the scene before his eyes. Inside this fortress was an entire town. The girl explained about the fortress to Musashi. Unlike ordinary fortresses and strongholds, this fortress could move because the warrior corps had to go everywhere to slay demons. The people in the fortress, each with a mission, would ensure this was maintained. Everyone would live together and fight as a family. While talking, 2 children ran out from the house, demanding a sword duel with Tsugumi. Watching the friend and the children playing together, Musashi and Kojiro, sitting nearby, involuntarily remembered their own past. They had also been happy like that. Lost in daydreams, they were brought back by Tsugumi's call to take turns playing with the children. In reality, Kojiro stepped in to play with the children, replacing Tsugumi. She told Musashi about her family. The warrior corps was indeed like a family. But her real family was no longer here. They had all gone before her to the other world. After hearing this, Musashi gave Tsugumi a sympathetic look and told her that his situation was similar, which made Tsugumi suddenly quiet. Looking at the back of the figure going to play with the children, Tsugumi blushed, thinking to herself that Musashi was strange. The leader's voice interrupted the little girl's thoughts. Tsugumi greeted the leader, her hands gripping her skirt tightly. In the evening, the leader of the Kosemdo warrior corps, Hideo, welcomed Musashi and Kojiro and introduced himself during dinner. While Musashi was enthusiastic and thought this leader was a good person, Kojiro was cautiously aware that laying out such a sumptuous feast just to receive the 2 of them was unusual. After examining Kojiro's demon steel, Hideo couldn't help but praise it and wanted to invite the 2 to fight alongside the warrior corps and share the demon steel. Hearing Musashi's question about demon steel, the leader realized he couldn't use the 2 of them, made a complete 180-degree turn, and ordered Tsugumi to use the demon-slaying blade, the double-stream flying swallow sword, to bind them. Catching them off guard, then ordered them to be thrown into prison. Because they possessed high-grade demon steel, they might also be hiding it somewhere else. Tsugumi was severely scolded by her master for not being able to bring strong warriors for him to use. Constantly fighting demons had left their warrior corps lacking both manpower and supplies, so next time they would issue a general mobilization order for both the elderly and children to fight demons to the death. Tsugumi wanted to object, but the master's bullet-like eyes and loud voice made the little girl speechless, acknowledging herself as useless. In prison, while Musashi was complaining about being locked in a dark place, Tsugumi came skipping along. There was a smile on her face, but her eyes revealed everything. The friend had been crying, her eyes swollen. Tsugumi struggled to ask the 2 friends about demon steel fragments from the demon god's body after it was sent to the other world. It was something with magical power that would help the warrior corps in the upcoming decisive battle. While Tsugumi was talking, Musashi keenly noticed that the little girl was trying to suppress something, her hand tightening, her whole body trembling, so he opened his mouth to inquire. Although Tsugumi denied what Musashi had just said, he still tried to persuade her to speak up. Tsugumi suddenly covered her mouth, her mind screaming thoughts opposing the general mobilization order from the master. She didn't want people to die. Tsugumi's soul was pulled back to reality by Kojiro's call. Tears flowing, Tsugumi screamed, then lowered her face to the ground and ran away. Running and thinking, tears rolling down her cheeks, her mind empty, hoping someone would come to save her. At this moment, the ground rumbled violently. Something was approaching the warrior core fortress. Wherever they went, the earth collapsed. On this side, Kojiro had successfully escaped thanks to his supreme hook-throwing skill, which allowed him to grab the key hanging on the opposite side. Standing on the wall overlooking the entire town, the two looked around and finally found where the demon steel rider had been hidden. The two friends decided to find their confiscated luggage and weapons together since it was already dawn. However, something was strange. Kojiro pointed toward the direction of the light. Both friends gaped at the enormity of what was approaching the building. In front of the large photo, Tsugumi recalled how she had lowered her face, ran, and cried miserably. The little girl had met the master and learned that there were signs of enemy attacks, requiring a general mobilization order for the people in the fortress to take up swords and slay demons, which stunned her. Remembering what Musashi had said to her, it was the first time Tsugumi had opposed Hideyo's words, making him angry. He clenched his fist but couldn't intimidate her. When sweet words didn't work, he pretended to be hurt to make the little girl regret her actions, then grabbed her collar, placed her in the corridor, expelled her from the fortress, and forced her to live alone in the wasteland outside the fortress walls. His intimidation successfully pierced the heart of the little girl who was trembling with fear. Tsugumi remembered that her older sister had also been treated like this by him in the past, realizing that because she had been constantly scolded by him, her confidence had gradually disappeared, and she couldn't think clearly anymore. She decided to separate from the evil master. Standing before her sister's memorial photo, she begged her sister for strength, but in her mind, she imagined the master and his threats. Her body, once full of determination, was now trembling. Her eyes became sharper, but when she was about to stab the master's face in the photo, the little girl hesitated. She couldn't do it. The image of Hideo appeared in her mind like a red demon grabbing and dragging her away. At the most dangerous moment, Musashi and Kojiro on the demon steel rider crashed through the wall, rushing straight into the room asking about the location of their weapons, startling the little girl. Having been indoctrinated since she was very young, when Musashi told her to disregard the words of the evil Hideo, she couldn't do it. Musashi approached to encourage the little girl, showing Tsugumi that she wasn't weak because she could beat Kojiro black and blue, and the glowing weapon in her hand was also very cool. Jumping onto the iron horse, Musashi turned back, extending his hand, waiting for the little girl to get on. Word by word, Musashi awakened her. She decided to show them where the weapons were, but in return, they had to help her with something. Kojiro drove the bike along the corridor, and Tsugumi recognized in the distance the horde of wood spirit demons Kodama. The three observed the situation from a hidden corner and formulated a strategy to free all the people. Musashi again had to resolve the conflict between the girl he had just met and his childhood friend by telling her about Kojiro's excellence, someone who could always be trusted at the last minute. Kojiro began to form a battle plan in his head, and they set to work. In the square below, Hideo was putting on an innocent face, giving speeches, and forcing the people to take up swords, stunning the crowd. Some wanted to flee but looked at the army blocking the exit behind them. Perhaps they only had the option of losing their lives there. A smoke bomb flew straight into the burning torch, intensifying the flames, and smoke began to spread around. Tsugumi stood on the roof, trying to attract Hideo's attention. However, she had been figured out by him. He immediately realized she was planning something. He warned that anyone who tried to escape would be executed by his subordinates. Musashi's voice rang out from within the thick smoke of the bomb that had not yet dissipated. The two young friends were seen taking down the last warriors standing guard while Hideo was busy blabbering. Tsugumi urged everyone to flee, but facing the fearsome master, no one dared to move, their faces clearly showing fear in response to his threats. Large round eyes displayed a cold, heartless look. Tsugumi decided to defeat the tyrant in front of her to give everyone more motivation. He merely smirked and raised his hand. Another group of soldiers ran over, following orders to ignore the people's pain and use any means to drag them back to their original positions. Musashi directly stepped forward, giving a staff blow to a soldier who was dragging children, not forgetting to turn back and tell Tsugumi to trust them, to focus on defeating the cruel person standing on the high platform. Hideo looked at his rebellious daughter who was displaying an attack stance, then gently stepped down from the platform and assumed a ready position. Tsugumi rushed forward but was quickly struck down to the ground after just a few moves. He continuously kicked hard at her small body while reminding her of the rules he had set. Grabbing Tsugumi's collar, pulling her up, his hand clenched into a fist, about to end the little girl's life when she spat blood in his face, shocking not only him but also the villagers and Musashi, who widened their eyes in astonishment. Tsugumi, barely alive on the ground, now stood up strongly to fight. That light, the blue light emanating from her small figure, was very similar to the aura of the Taikta warrior core. Determination and courage filled her chest. Tsugumi didn't hesitate to rush toward the arrowheads fired by the leader. The people in the town and the two strange friends she had just met all held their breath witnessing that scene. The master continued to threaten to send the villagers to the other world, causing everyone to cower in fear. Tsugumi tried to encourage everyone to escape because even if they survived today, tomorrow or the day after might not be the same. And if they continued to obey the master, one day the place filled with their dear memories would also be leveled by demons, so the only way now to protect those they loved was to stand up and fight. 3 arrows flew simultaneously, but the little girl avoided them all. Instead, the master was tightly bound by Tsugumi's power rope, unable to move. The little girl used all her strength to slam him to the floor, causing him pain to the point of immobility. Tsugumi's words earlier seemed to have moved the villagers. They ran, escaping to a safer place. The demon was approaching closer and closer. The vibrations could be felt on the ground. Tsugumi knew that it was too late to run now, but the villagers had escaped. The little girl was somewhat satisfied. Her small legs now trembled. The little girl still wanted to live. Musashi's loud call surprised her. That hand once again reached out to save Tsugumi, pulling her newly acquainted friend onto the bike. Musashi didn't forget to praise her courage and coolness, making Tsugumi blush and smile with squinted eyes. Elsewhere, a purple cloak fluttered, and a silver-haired young man stood in the midst of a battlefield full of swords, saying something. After the demon swept through, the entire town was devastated, with nothing left. Although the entire fortress had been destroyed, there was a smile on everyone's lips. Wouldn't that be better? Musashi and Kojiro went to check the situation around the town when they heard a call. The two turned around and were immediately stunned to see 2 elderly women bowing at their feet, with determined eyes hoping the two could take Tsugumi along as they left the fortress. The old woman and Tsugumi, one trying to pull and one trying to hug the remaining pillar after the demon's devastation the night before. Musashi wondered if she didn't want to leave like that. Why force her to go? The old woman who had served closely by the master's side told them the situation. Apart from taking Tsugumi away from here to free her from the control of the desperate master who had been betrayed by the people, there was no other way. Tsugumi jumped down from the pillar and affirmed that she would no longer obey the Lord. But when questioned further, she froze because that obsession still somewhat haunted the little girl. Listening to the other villagers who wanted to protect her as she had saved them, Tsugumi wiped away her tears, packed up her memories of this place, and agreed to leave. On a high column of a bare house, the consequence of being swept by the demon, Tsugumi sat hugging her knees in thought when Musashi approached, gently reminding his friend to go to sleep because they would depart early the next day, while also wondering why she had chosen to leave the village. The two sat down to talk, and Tsugumi told her friend about the past and how she had always obeyed the Lord. And if she stayed, there was a high possibility she would become his puppet again and harm people. She also told him that she couldn't leave the Lord even though they didn't have blood relations. But Musashi was the same. He also cherished Kojiro's father as his own father and was grateful that he had taught him swordsmanship so he could have his current dream. The friend continued to bury her face in her knees, while Musashi looked at her with gentle eyes and sat beside her like that. Early the next morning, the 3 bid farewell to the villagers and thanked everyone for their care during their stay. Tsugumi hugged her package from the village tightly, feeling sad. A swarm of dandelions flew toward them, and the sound of children racing and calling Tsugumi's name moved her to tears as she saw the faces of the children running after the bike. She reached out to catch the fragile dandelion petal floating in the wind. Tsugumi promised everyone that she would return on the day she felt confident enough to live. So the warrior corps had gained a new member. Musashi warned that ahead where they were going, a demon sword would appear, but Tsugumi didn't care much because now she wouldn't receive praise from those she loved anymore. To encourage the little friend whining like a cat at the back of the bike, Musashi gave a thumbs up and said that from now on, he would praise her in their place, and the result was a slap and the two arguing. Kojiro in front was helpless, having to turn back to remind the two of the motto of the journey, harmony and no arguing. They were quarreling, weren't they? Tsugumi didn't understand why she suddenly clung to Musashi like a leech, with her chest pressing against him. Wasn't that causing a misunderstanding for the poor Kojiro hiding behind the tree trunk? Kojiro was so angry that he gritted his teeth, squeezing hard on the poor old tree trunk, turning to look at Tsugumi. Musashi imagined the scenario of heartlessly kicking away the clingy friend. But on second thought, now that Tsugumi was also a teammate, he didn't want to do that. Musashi's arm went up, and Tsugumi suddenly backed away, making Musashi think she had understood his intention. But no. Tsugumi suddenly removed her top layer of clothing, the pair of ripe peaches right in front of Musashi, making him freeze. About to say something, Musashi turned to see his friend above, even more shocked. Although he had covered his mouth with his hand, it was so wide open it seemed like his jaw was about to touch the ground. Musashi's inner self screamed, just hoping his friend wouldn't misunderstand him, because that look wasn't quite right. He also didn't want their 10-year friendship to end in such a silly situation. However, to resolve this situation, Musashi had to reveal a secret that he didn't even want Kojiro to know, that he liked women much older than himself. Musashi was thinking and appearing confused. If he wanted to resolve the misunderstanding, he had to speak up, although it would hurt Tsugumi, but at the same time, he didn't want his friend to know that embarrassing secret. At the tree in the distance, Kojiro was still blushing from Tsugumi's chest display. Seeing Musashi's unprecedented blushing face made his misunderstanding even worse. And to understand the complex mood he was having, Kojiro also had to reveal a secret. He never wanted to admit that he had zero experience with girls. He began to think of a billion random things and interpret everything in different directions, then held his head just like Musashi earlier. Two streams of thought, without appointment, pointed toward Tsugumi. Not knowing what her purpose was, Tsugumi still hadn't put back on her upper body clothes, extending her hand toward the two, proposing friendship, to the bewilderment and fear of the two young men. Tsugumi's legs were unsteady, her face downcast, sweat drenched from the tension of making friends with outsiders for the first time, her speech becoming stuttered. Musashi asked for an explanation for her actions. After hearing the answer that it was how she wanted to make friends with them, the two friends simultaneously placed their hands on her fair shoulders, nodding, making Tsugumi's face flush red. Falling asleep while reading a book until morning, Musashi woke up startled from a dream where he threw stones at Kojiro's father. With eyes not yet fully alert, a demon emerged from the ground, gnawed on Kojiro's sword, and scurried away before Musashi's astonished eyes. Musashi's loud shout startled the sleepy Kojiro awake. Musashi desperately chased after the demon, grabbed an iron bar, and struck directly at the demon's horn, causing it to shudder in pain. But the iron bar in his hand also broke. While Musashi was pondering whether it was a demon god or not, the blue demon ran away. Musashi jumped on top of the demon's head, using all his strength to try to shatter the horn protruding from its head. But the result was a broken staff, while the horn remained unscathed, making Musashi even more frustrated. Chasing it, the small demon led Musashi to a place with long swords stuck straight into the ground, and a gray-haired man doing something that looked like chanting a spell, making him freeze. The man asked whether he was looking at the sword or at him. The sword beside him could slay demons. Did he need to borrow it? Seeing the demon about to swallow the sword that Kojiro's father had left for him, Musashi didn't think much, immediately drawing the sword. As soon as he grasped the hilt, a powerful blade aura emanated from Musashi's body. While he was still wondering what the hell that was, the man's voice called for him to slash the demon. Musashi rushed forward, with one slash killing the demon, but also exhausting who knows how much strength, sweat streaming down his face, power concentrated in the sword. For the first time, Musashi experienced the exhilarating feeling after slaying a demon. Suddenly, the sword broke in half right before his eyes, causing Musashi to panic, repeatedly apologizing to the man in front of him. Wondering why Musashi emitted such a powerful blade aura when using the demon steel blade, the man approached, grabbed Musashi's hair, and used his golden glowing pupils to test if this red-haired boy was the person he was looking for. On top of a high rock mountain, a little girl with a skull mask and a foxtail reminded the white-haired friend that it was time to do something, her legs nimbly jumping down the rock ledges. He drew a picture with the yin-yang symbol surrounded by 8 figures. Musashi stood listening to the guy praising the swords like beautiful women, his face full of question marks. The friend beside him witnessing this scene covered her mouth, feeling nauseous, hoping Musashi would understand that the owner loved demon blades more than his daily meals. He laughed loudly, then turned and walked away with his traveling companion. Musashi asked who they were. The ambiguous, suggestive answer left him puzzled. Only when he heard the calls of his two teammates running towards him did he regain his composure. Musashi assured them he was fine, remembering that the people over there had lent him a sword. But when he raised his hand holding the sword, it had disappeared. Looking toward where the two had stood, he only saw Kojiro picking up his sword. Sitting on the demon steel rider, Musashi still couldn't forget the wonderful feeling when holding that sword, wanting to use it again. The three of them continued to talk about weapons made from demon steel. Tsugumi took them to a place selling the kind of weapons that Musashi and Kojiro thought would require overcoming countless difficulties to obtain. When warriors gathered at the place where demon gods appeared, merchants targeted them as buyers of essential items, and even demon steel blades were sold like market goods here. Kojiro thought they should equip themselves for battle. Musashi and Tsugumi's eyes lit up, beginning a shopping journey, forgetting that they probably didn't carry a single coin with them. At a stall, people were competing in an auction for the Demon Steel Rider Energy Crystal number 4, closing at a price of 4,000. Musashi excitedly looked around. Here were warriors, there were warriors everywhere around him, making him feel jubilant inside. Tsugumi explained to the two rookie friends about Demon Steel, which was used as a currency when trading goods with Warrior Core. Musashi eagerly awaited the time when he could officially own highly competitive items that were auctioned last, like the Demon Steel Blade. The three went to a restaurant and were enjoying the hot, fresh flavors when a red-faced drunk warrior approached, asking the name of their warrior core, making all three suddenly remember they hadn't yet decided on an official name. The orange-haired guy heard the noise, opened the window, and rushed in to eat. When discovered, he stopped trying to kill the Divine Eye Man. The three continued eating while discussing choosing a leader and other issues surrounding the establishment of their warrior core. What Musashi had been looking forward to most arrived. It was time for the Demon Steel Blade auction. While Musashi was pondering which sword to choose, an adult's voice rang out, instructing him on how to select a sword. He immediately blushed. This big sister was the head blacksmith of the Ruzoji Corps, named Mitsuru Osafune. When she learned that today was their first day choosing swords, the older sister told them about the importance of this first day. It could be considered momentous, officially marking the maturity of a warrior. Kojiro ran around admiring the precious swords, hesitating for a long time, unable to choose a satisfactory demon steel blade. In contrast, Musashi had already chosen the precious sword he desired, the Enma Odachi Flame Demon Great Sword. Kojiro approached a sword that no one was paying attention to, deciding to choose it because it was like himself. The Vorpal Cherry Blossom he chose was also a good sword. Kojiro turned back and forth, wondering why the auction hadn't started yet, when Mitsuru came over and told him to try holding the sword's hilt. Hearing this, Musashi on the other side didn't hesitate any longer, immediately grabbing the hilt. A strange feeling penetrated his body. Musashi was enveloped in a white light. He had officially entered the sword testing state. After hearing explanations about the sword testing state from Mitsuru and Tsugumi, Kojiro also began to touch the sword's hilt. The feeling of the sword immediately entering him, his blood vessels boiling as if something was entering his body. Kojiro saw again what had happened in the past when he was very young, being despised and discriminated against. With that flashback, the ritual ended, the sword glowed, and pieces of stone appeared behind Kojiro. He had successfully tested the sword. One by one, others also passed the test and received their own swords. The light emitted from each of them was different. Mitsuru explained that it was the soul light of each warrior. Meanwhile, Musashi, in a different dimension, pitch black, was brought to the memory of that day when he saw Kojiro's father executed in an extremely brutal manner. While Musashi was dazed about the current situation, a big eye opened in front of him, then transformed into a girl, making his heart skip a beat. Her hug was warm until Musashi was lifted high, his soul seeming to tear from his body. Outside, everyone had successfully tested their swords. Only Musashi still maintained the same posture, not returning, arousing Tsugumi's curiosity. Suddenly, instead of appearing behind his back, the stone fragments grew from Musashi's eyes, then gradually spread throughout his body, and they were black. Musashi fell to the ground, the sword falling from his hand. His two teammates ran over to lift him up and check on his health. Although Musashi lost part of his strength, he still insisted on trying again. cutting the falling leaves in half. Musashi still couldn't succeed. Mitsuru stepped forward, asking him to stop torturing himself to test the sword because he couldn't use the demon steel blade. Those with souls emitting black light like him would be rejected by the demon steel blade no matter how hard they tried. In other words, Musashi was a rider. His soul was black, would forever be black, and could only stop here. Musashi sat until the sun rose high, his head still pondering Mitsuru's words. Looking up at the sky, he questioned his childhood dream. The promise to fulfill with Kojiro was still incomplete. Would he give up here? Opening his eyes again, Kojiro and Sugami were standing before him. The three were about to say something when from the sky, demon gods landed one after another, occupying the mountain peak and sending down small demons shaped like buffaloes, but with large mouths and sharp teeth under their bellies. Standing before the demon, Musashi felt a strange feeling. Standing before the flame hell Tengu in the old town, he hadn't been as afraid as this. His feet instinctively stepped back half a step, trembling non-stop, sweat beginning to pour out. The small demon extended its strangely sharp front legs toward where Musashi was standing thinking. A flash of blue light, Kojiro rushed forward with the demon steel blade he had just acquired, making a move to rescue Musashi. The villagers shouted, competing to run away. A mother and child unfortunately blocked by demons fell to the ground in fear. Kojiro once again appeared to eliminate the danger, the feeling of his hand heating up. Kojiro began to perform sword techniques, destroying the demon and absorbing the demon steel. Receiving thanks and sparkling eyes from the two people he had just saved, Kojiro naturally felt his cheeks warming, looking down at the demon steel blade. That's right, it was thanks to it. Because of it, he could slay demons and hear words that no one had ever said to him before. This was exactly what demon slaying was. The person standing next to him recognized Musashi, who had just failed the sword test, and asked why he still held on to such obsessions. Musashi silently watched his friend of 10 years being surrounded by people praising and complimenting him. Musashi stood in a corner, realizing that in the scroll containing images of smiling, happy warriors, he also wanted to have a position to stand with Kojiro. According to another warrior, preparing to go up the mountain to slay demons, Kojiro turned back to call Musashi, but was surprised to see his friend sitting cross-legged on the ground, waving goodbye to his two teammates. Hearing this, Kojiro didn't think anymore, immediately turning away. The villagers also began to disperse, each to their own tasks, leaving only Musashi suffering, sitting on the ground, a feeling of discomfort welling up in his chest, uncomfortable because he couldn't fight. He questioned himself about what to do, but didn't know what to do. Thinking back to the sword test, hadn't he also used his own light to defeat demons like Kojiro and others in that valley? Lost in thought, raising his head, he was surprised to see the silver-haired guy from before. Musashi thought he had come to mock him, but in fact, he came to recruit an ally. Lightly pulling the cloth on his chest, stones protruded outward. Also black like his light, the light that had appeared when Musashi conducted the sword test. Musashi looked at the black minerals protruding from that man's body and pondered. A tear fell, then others followed one after another. The man was crying, moved because he had found the person he had always wanted to meet. From the first time he met Musashi, he had suspected, and now couldn't believe he was standing here, thinking he was talking to Musashi. It turned out he was talking to what was inside him, the black mineral that had prevented Musashi from using the demon steel blade. Then he shared his own story, that he had also once been in Musashi's current situation. Every word hit home with the red-haired young man in front of him. After reminiscing about the past, Musashi was curious whether people like them had ways to become stronger. The man with cunning yellow eyes firmly affirmed this. Musashi once again asked what he needed to do and received guidance from the strange man. He continued to wonder if he became stronger, how strong would he be? The stranger, without a word, directly drew the large sword on his back to demonstrate. The sword technique was performed in just a few seconds. A large area of land sank deep down, then rose high, touching the sky. With another technique, the block of earth shattered into countless pieces, falling densely like rain, greatly surprising Musashi. The sunken land began to emit smoke. The man turned back, smiling at Musashi, throwing a sharp red sword at Musashi's feet. The man suggested he test the sword to become a demon steel blade. Hearing this, Musashi suddenly froze. Yes, he wanted to become stronger, but to fight alongside Kojiro, not to become the soul of a sword. Hearing this, the man proposed turning Kojiro into a sword as well, so the two of them would never have to be apart again. Musashi rushed forward to grab the man, but he turned and pushed him into the deep pit he had just created, along with the red sword. Following the group going to slay the demon god, Kojiro was more enthusiastic than ever, walking very hurriedly. Hearing Tsugumi's call, he stopped. The friend and Kojiro talked about Musashi. Kojiro was so enthusiastic because of his friend, who had helped him find the demon god's weakness, and he was waiting for him to rise up and stand beside him once more. However, Tsugumi had realized something different. If he was the legendary rider, what was Musashi's true identity? With such great power, did he have a special origin? She hoped Kojiro would answer her questions. The two stopped on the way, and Kojiro told Tsugumi about Musashi's background. But what surprised the little girl was that Musashi was a genuine farmer's son from Tatsuyama village, where they had previously lived. Hearing this, Tsugumi disappointedly slumped to the ground. Kojiro continued to tell about his own background. Unlike Musashi, he was the only remaining drop of warrior blood there. His house was isolated from the village. Unlike those who always discriminated against and hated swords, Musashi was a strange child. That day, when he saw Kojiro practicing swordplay, that child was extremely interested, and Kojiro gained his first friend, who also helped him escape from those dark days. Perhaps that strangeness was inherited from the previous generation. Musashi's parents ignored the gossip from those around them. They treated Kojiro and his father very well, but good people don't live long. Musashi's parents also died from illness when our friend was young. Hearing this story, Tsugumi wondered even more why only the red-haired friend was rejected by the demon steel blade. These words also moved Kojiro's mind. Looking up at the blue sky, Kojiro also had concerns. Would the two of them be happy together and stand together as they did in the past? In another development, the stranger standing on the cliff was wondering what would happen when a female subordinate loudly called to report that she had brought lunch. It turned out that his name was Inukai Shiro, and the purple-brown-haired girl was Inukai Nanao, and it was unclear which warrior faction they belonged to. Nanao asked about Musashi, then cast a regretful look down to where that friend had fallen. Nanao immediately read her master's trick. He was a glib great demon god, only serious when mentioning demon steel blades, and besides his close subordinate Nanao, he could lie to anyone. His purpose in pushing the poor red-haired friend there was because Musashi had the black miracle goddess he had been searching for all this time, which could help him obtain more black minerals. Leaving the mess with a huge hole to Nanao, Shiro turned to find his next prey. Sitting at the mouth of the bottomless deep pit, Nanao felt sorry for Musashi because soon, in hell, he would have to decide between the two harshest choices. Musashi in the pit lost his sense of time. He was still falling, with no end in sight. He reached to the side, trying to reduce friction but failed. Looking to the side, Musashi grasped the sword tightly and stuck it into the wall of the pit, finally stopping, suspended in mid-air. However, from the hand holding the sword, black minerals grew and gradually spread throughout his body, making him look like a hedgehog. Musashi felt his body become heavy, and his consciousness gradually faded, just like when he tested the sword. Below him was molten lava. One slip and he could be burned alive. Musashi banged his head against the earth wall in front of him, keeping himself in an alert state, using the densely growing minerals on his body as tools to help him climb back up. A voice rang out, and the minerals on Musashi's body suddenly extended at a dizzying rate. The rapidly increasing weight caused Musashi to lose balance and fall toward the molten lava flow below, which was just waiting to swallow everything alive. Opening his eyes again, Musashi found himself in a place similar to when he tested the sword. That voice rang out again. Turning around, it was the voice of the obsidian goddess. The goddess tried to persuade Musashi to stay with her because even if he left, he couldn't do anything without fighting power. But seeing Musashi stubbornly hitting the wall in front of him with his bare hands, she transformed into a frightening form, grabbing Musashi's hand, her fierce eyes looking at him. Musashi was taken back to the memory when his parents died of disease. The people around not only showed no remorse but blamed the newly deceased, especially Musashi's parents, because they had a relationship with a warrior. Then they cast unfriendly eyes toward the surviving child, Musashi, discussing what his future would be. Young Musashi at that time was small like a candy, carrying a tiny luggage bag to beg for help from people he knew. But no one intended to help him. Finally, he found a family to take him in. But because they didn't want to lose face for sheltering the child of those who didn't have enough faith in demons, they ordered him not to leave the kitchen without their permission. Innocent Musashi, curious about what was wrong with him and his family associating with Kojiro and his father, was struck by his uncle, causing the child extreme pain. They also demanded that Musashi do nothing and not answer them at all. Just live quietly in the house and don't cause them trouble. The next morning, the uncle's family continued their routine as usual, while Musashi just stood in a corner like an excess person. After everyone left to work in the fields, noticing the lunchbox his uncle had forgotten on the table, Musashi decided to bring it to where they worked, causing the uncle's family to be teased and mocked by others. Upon returning home, Musashi was beaten again, thrown from the dining table, lying sprawled on the ground, the eyes of a child orphaned of parents full of resentment and grievance. He was like an invisible ghost. No one talked to him, no one smiled, no one called his name. Only the fact that he was still breathing. But compared to being abandoned by the whole world like that, he realized he was just breathing, not living like a normal human being. The sad little boy, tears falling, was thinking about wanting to do something useful when an old woman approached, wanting to ask him to do something, making the little boy suddenly become happy. Unexpectedly, it was to throw stones at the person he loved most after his parents, Kojiro's father. Under pressure from those around him, he gritted his teeth, although unwilling, but the voices grew increasingly loud. He was forced to throw the stone and utter words he never wanted to say, causing the old warrior's face to wrinkle, pain emanating from his expression. Recalling the memory fragment that Musashi always wanted to forget, the obsidian goddess wanted to extinguish Musashi's fighting will and let him hide here forever. Because if he went outside, it meant the obsidian goddess would be captured by those bad people. Musashi's body gradually turned to stone. The goddess approached, her large hand gently embracing the small body like a toy. On the mountain peak, the warrior corps had advanced to where the demon god was dwelling. The form of the demon god astonished both Tsugumi and Kojiro as they saw purple liquid flowing from its body. Combined with the fact that they couldn't see the demon's head, Kojiro thought the demon had already been dealt with by someone else and they had wasted their journey coming here. However, looking at the huge object before them, Tsugumi had the opposite thought, because if the demon had been sent to the other world by someone, it would have disappeared and turned into demon steel. But its body was still here, which proved it was still alive and its horn hadn't been cut off. Kojiro approached the demon. For Musashi's sake, he had to at least find the demon's weak point. Meanwhile, Musashi lay under a red stream, with minerals growing densely and sharply all over his body, with only one eye still slightly visible. Everyone was wondering where the demon's horn was inserted. Kojiro guessed it must be on the missing head and received agreement from a strange voice. Turning around, the person standing on the motionless body of the demon god was Shiro. He also admitted that he had taken the demon god's head, then jumped to the ground. Without saying a word, he went straight to where Kojiro was standing, but was surrounded by other warriors who questioned him about the location of the demon god's head. Shiro turned his back to look at the older warrior who had just asked, gently drawing the sword on his back and pointing it straight to the sky. The bodies of those warriors immediately collapsed to the ground. Their lives had been taken by him to everyone's surprise. Without beating around the bush, Shiro directly said that he wanted the demon steel blades of all those present there, and they would all be sent to the other world by him. This statement from Shiro awakened the defensive instincts of the warriors. They simultaneously raised their swords and performed techniques toward Shiro. But unexpectedly, this was the raw material he had been waiting for. With one sword technique, the ground opened up, and the warriors fell one after another into what he called the furnace. The power he emitted was more terrifying than ever. Mitsuru and her teammates realized that Shiro wasn't just an ordinary blade hunter, stealing the power of demon steel blades by sending the souls of their owners to the other world, but something even more terrible. Hearing Tsugumi call Kojiro's name, he approached step by step and told him what he had done to his dearest friend, making Kojiro both surprised and angry. His mouth twitching, eyes wide open, throat choked, unable to say another word. Musashi, with a bit of memory left, asked himself what he was doing and received the answer from the goddess that he was turning into black mineral. The goddess thought she would be able to escape if she pulled him down to the bottom of the lava. A blue mineral pierced through space and flew over, looking like a rope wrapping around Musashi's mineralizing body and pulling him up. They had searched down to that deep place. Opening his eyes once more, looking at his cracked hand, Musashi realized he was still alive. And the person who had pulled him out of the abyss because she was too eager to complete her mission was Nanao. Musashi looked down the deep abyss and suddenly remembered Shiro's words. Realizing that Kojiro and Sugimi were in danger, he quickly ran off, not forgetting to send his thanks to Nanao. The voice of the obsidian goddess rang in the head of the person who had just pulled him up. Musashi smirked because she didn't understand. The memory of Musashi throwing stones at Kojiro's father that day appeared again. The little boy approached Kojiro's yard and then hesitated, not knowing whether he could enter or not, when Kojiro's father opened the door and invited him inside. The kettle boiled like the emotions in Musashi's heart, boiling chaotically. The little boy held his head, lowered his face, torturing and criticizing himself. The old warrior sitting beside him didn't forget to comfort the poor boy who had been forced into a difficult situation. Holding the small hands, he was very happy because since Musashi came, Kojiro, from a boy who was cold-shouldered and shunned by the entire village, had a ray of hope. So to him, Musashi wasn't a sinful child but a benefactor, and he instructed him from now on not to underestimate himself. His words were so serious that the little boy burst into tears. Kojiro's father gently patted the red-haired boy's head and asked if he wanted to stay with his family. From then on, Kojiro's father adopted and raised Musashi, and laughter echoed throughout the yard. It was warriors like this who made Musashi's heart stir. He vowed he would not betray his dream and would always continue to move forward. On the mountain peak, Shiro frantically used his power, equal to a demon god, to slaughter the small lives of the warriors. Although he despised those who ran away because when they became demon steel blades, they would be dull swords. But because of his self-promise with Musashi, Shiro, with the speed of light, rushed toward Kojiro's eyes. Realizing this, Kojiro separated from the group and ran in the opposite direction, diverting Shiro's attention so others could escape. Kojiro used all his strength to run, while Shiro leisurely walked behind. Cornered, looking at the cold-blooded person approaching, Kojiro drew his Vorpal Cherry Blossom sword, performed sword techniques, but none of his strikes hit him. In contrast, Shiro, with just one sword dance, made him cough up fresh blood, painfully falling to the ground. Shiro stepped forward, one hand lifting Kojiro high. Just when Kojiro thought he would be slashed, everything suddenly stopped. Shiro had turned his head in another direction, and was shocked to see Musashi standing in the distance, his hand loosening, dropping Kojiro to the ground. With a sword in hand, Musashi, with determined eyes, stepped forward to help Kojiro, who was sitting on the ground, to stand up. Seeing the demon steel blade in Musashi's hand, Kojiro thought his friend could now use the sword, but received a head shake from Musashi. Shiro stood to the side with a cold face, trying to understand the situation before him. When he heard Nanao's call, his expression immediately changed. He playfully asked and demanded an explanation from Nanao. After hearing the whole story, he patted the little girl's head and didn't blame her because the events unfolding before him were becoming increasingly interesting. Because Musashi was still in the process of assimilating with the mineral, they only needed to point the sword tip to force the goddess inside Musashi to make a decision. Understanding Shiro's intention, Nanao's entire body emitted a bright green light, blazing like a flame. On the opposite side, Kojiro still didn't understand what grudge he had with those people when Musashi spoke up to clarify that the people those two were targeting was actually himself. Sugimi both wondered and reproached why Musashi, who couldn't use a sword, still insisted on running to them. He did it for his teammates. A simple truth when being a warrior was to fight alongside one's comrades. Hearing this, Kojiro's heart was filled with many thoughts. He remembered their childhood, when the two had promised to fight together, and reflected. Then, remembering the short time without Musashi by his side, Kojiro realized that Musashi himself didn't care about fighting for whom. Having said he would always be by Kojiro's side to fight together, Musashi would always do so. The determined nod of the two friends terrified Sugimi, because they all knew clearly how powerful the person standing on the other side was, and they were supposed to slay demons, not warriors slaying warriors. But faced with the situation where those two were targeting them like this, if they ran away, they would implicate others. Kojiro also didn't want to have no face to meet his father in the underworld to tell him that he sacrificed himself by running away and being slaughtered rather than gloriously sacrificing on the battlefield. The three of them stood together, displaying a stance ready for battle. Nanao was still skipping around and decided not to let her master have to lift a finger against those who only had the strength of a plaything. Having said that, the staff in Nanao's hands split into 7. It was the 7-belled armadillo sword with the supreme fairy sword 7-blade technique unleashed, making it difficult for the trio to dodge. Nanao continuously swung her staff. Each time, dozens of blades flew toward the three on the other side. A supreme skill, But because Nanao wasn't a demon, Musashi had the opportunity to fight freely. He rushed forward wave after wave, dodging all the techniques the opponent unleashed. Planting his sword into the rock behind him, Musashi jumped up high again. But at the moment when he thought he was about to defeat Nanao, Musashi was thrown far away by the little girl's sword technique. Tsugumi was confused, not knowing what to do when she wanted to attack but couldn't touch the opponent's sword. While Musashi remembered that when he had rushed forward to slash Nanao, each sword that flew toward him, if slashed by him, had a reaction. This meant they had to simultaneously destroy all 7 swords floating above, aiming to destroy the opponent's weapon to have a chance of success. With a serious look in his eyes, Kojiro had come up with a battle plan. Shiro, sitting on the demon god's body, asked if Nanao was okay fighting alone, and Nanao responded that she was fine and would complete the mission of stealing the host's soul. Musashi. Nanao was still very calm because, to her, this was a deadly battle of 7 against 3 of the 3 young friends standing opposite, not her, so she taunted them. Suddenly, Tsugumi and Musashi turned their backs and split in opposite directions, running in reverse directions, causing Nanao to be distracted and unsure of what they were doing and what she should do. Next, Nanao's target was the red-haired friend. She shot a beam of light toward Musashi. It seemed she had hit him, but it turned out that Musashi and Tsugumi had caught Nanao's sword. Now understanding the plan of the 3, it was too late. Musashi gained momentum and flew into the air, destroying each section of Nanao's staff one by one. However, they had only destroyed one of the 7 swords. Nanao was preparing to launch her next attack when Shiro jumped down to block her. He silently walked straight toward the 3 young friends standing on the other side. Nanao, panicking, ran after him hoping Shiro would delegate the mission back to her, but received a cold look and a request for her to get out of the way so he could fight alone. To him, the 2 of them had never fought together. A weak teammate like Nanao would only get in his way. His words, no different from abandonment, deeply hurt Nanao. Shiro stood in a stance with his sword in front of him, the sword wheel. What had never appeared on his sword before now appeared before everyone's eyes. This was when Shiro unleashed his full power attack. It seemed something terrible was about to happen, but when the sword swung up, there was only a strong wind that blew past their eyes. Kojiro had just finished warning Musashi to be careful when he realized they were surrounded by a wall of light. An entire large mountain was neatly contained within a box of purple light like a toy. His finger flipped over, and the entire mountain shook. The mountain peak, like a toy, was cut in half and then flipped upside down. Musashi stuck his sword into the ground, desperately holding on tight to barely manage to stay on the ground. The remaining warriors, unable to react in time, fell one after another. Looking to the side and seeing Kojiro with one hand holding the little friend and the other gripping the sword stuck in the ground, Musashi felt somewhat relieved. But it was only a matter of time. If they couldn't hold on, they would fall like the others. Standing on the upper surface, seeing that there were still a few people who hadn't fallen completely, Shiro used his sword to draw a square on the ground above the other warriors, causing them to immediately leave that spot. He stood high, talking casually for a while, criticizing those below for not wanting to slay demons but only wanting to become the strongest warrior with the strongest demon steel blade. Why did they need the power of a whole group of people gathering like insects avoiding the cold? His way of speaking was exactly like the obsidian goddess whom Musashi had met. Kojiro called out to Musashi, who was thinking, and he felt something wasn't quite right. Shiro thrust his sword forcefully into the ground, and those on the lower surface all fell at once. Then suddenly, everything before Musashi's eyes seemed to freeze. Everyone stopped in midair. A hand gently pulled aside the sky like pulling a curtain. It was the obsidian goddess. It was she who had frozen time and light at this moment, not the technique of the black-robed sword-wielding warrior. He was an enemy of the goddess and wanted to take Musashi's life to seize her power. Having said that, the goddess reached out to pull Musashi's soul from his suspended body, and that meant the others would no longer exist in this world. Musashi disagreed. He acknowledged himself as weak, and if alone, he couldn't exist, and wanted to see how far he could go with his teammates. Humans cannot live in isolation, and Musashi had 2 friends always by his side. The power to draw others together was a useful quality for small beings like humans to fight against evil demons. Conquered by Musashi's words, the goddess finally decided to give him her power. Her way of fighting would use Musashi's body to behold. Everything returned to its orbit. While everyone was still panicking, falling in mid-air, a beam of light appeared. Black minerals grew from the inverted mountain peak and attracted all demon steel blades, the stone absorbing the blade energy. The mysterious power, like rumbling thunder, resided in each demon steel blade to draw the battlefield. With a wave of the hand, Shiro's weapon was neatly in Musashi's hand. The inverted mountain peak emitted a dazzling light, the battlefield of light like a purple snowflake hovering. The controller of demon steel blades, the obsidian goddess, appeared in Musashi's form, but with black hair and eyes changing to clear blue like still water, occasionally emitting lightning. The person who restored the mountain peak to its proper shape. Earth below, sky above, the people holding demon steel blades in their hands also slowly landed safely. Kojiro surprisingly asked Musashi how he had stolen the demon steel blade from Shiro and dissolved his technique, but received a cold yes in return. The person now present before him was certainly not Musashi. The black sword wheel burst into dark light, pointing at the heretic who bent the blade energy from Nanao's staff. To the surprise of Kojiro and Tsugumi, the goddess explained to them why Musashi, carrying black minerals, couldn't use demon steel blades. With the power of dark magic, Musashi could push and pull blade energy, becoming invincible, because the goddess was just an existence within the host's body. When awakened, he could use invincible power, but only for a short time, and when asleep again, the power would be taken away from the host, who could be threatened with life, and that was when he needed teammates by his side. After hearing Kojiro's affirmation that he would always accompany Musashi, the goddess gave him a kiss on the top of his head, making Kojiro dumbfounded. Shiro tried to draw the goddess to his side, but in vain. The goddess absorbed blade energy from human warriors, creating a battlefield of meteor showers brightening the sky. The mockery Shiro had said earlier might be true, but when the light emitted from the swords combined to form layers connecting with the stars above, it could defeat anyone. Everyone was utterly surprised by the largest battlefield, the most magnificent power ever witnessed. A finger pointing directly at the heretic accompanied by a farewell from the goddess. The goddess returned to the body, telling Musashi that everything was over, and not forgetting to advise him that in the future, no matter who he meets, he shouldn't let himself lose his life. He shouldn't be like that year when Jisai Kojiro's father had half of his will killed. Without time to explain further Musashi's question, the goddess once again borrowed his body for him to behold her final battle in the real world. One strike was enough to kill the opponent. All warriors simultaneously raised their swords high for the goddess to absorb the blade energy from their demon steel blades, a magnificent scene that excited Shiro greatly. That hair turned white-gray. The obsidian goddess, with one strike, made the opponent disappear in an instant. Rocks continuously shattered before the power of the strike. With just one sword swing, several mountains consecutively lost their peaks, concaved like a half-moon. The battle had ended, but Musashi could still feel his heart beating rapidly, his hands trembling in waves. Thanks to the goddess with her unparalleled power, he had overcome it. The calls of Kojiro and Tsugumi from the distance running over cut short his unfinished thoughts. The two approached to check if Musashi was still okay after the goddess's performance earlier. The three chatted happily, with Tsugumi even teasing Kojiro. The two engaged in banter. Although Musashi had returned to his body, he still remembered the last thing the goddess had told him about Jisai. He was curious about what it meant. What kind of relationship did she have with the person he had always loved as a second father? Lost in thought, Tsugumi pointed at the sword Musashi was holding in his hand. He had just raised his hand to observe when the sword once again seemed about to break and snapped. Mitsuru approached to explain to him why such a phenomenon occurred, and also, on behalf of everyone, thanked him for saving their lives, promising to do everything to repay that debt. Some even offered to give him a new sword themselves. Receiving everyone's praise, Musashi was as happy as if celebrating a festival, smiling brightly. Suddenly, someone shouted in surprise when they saw that the body of the demon god that had just been lying there had disappeared, leaving only a deep pit exactly like the one Musashi had been pushed into by Shiro. The waves lapped rhythmically. From the sky suddenly appeared a hole. Shiro, Nanao, and the body of the demon god, including the missing head, slowly passed through the hole that Shiro had created by piercing the sky. Recalling the goddess's mischievous smile, Shiro vowed to himself that next time they met, he would surely capture her. Hundreds of swords were thrust into the ground, a magnificent scene but filled with sorrow. It was a grand ceremony, like a mass funeral for the unfortunate warriors who had sacrificed themselves in yesterday's battle. It was the weeping of women who had lost their husbands, the sniffling of children who had lost their fathers, a scene full of pain. The relatives of the warriors could hardly leave those swords because they were relics. The demon steel blades retained the emotions of their owners, so they were considered evidence of the warrior's existence. Hearing this, Kojiro unconsciously gripped the hilt of the sword his late father had given him and remembered him. But Tsugumi didn't think so. The demon steel blade in the little girl's hand was also left by her late sister, but to her, it was just an object. It couldn't transform into a person, nor could it give her the feeling of being closer to her sister. Perhaps having gone through the pain of losing the people they loved most, all three empathized with each other. Looking at the boy sitting crying in front of the sword, Musashi's face twisted, perhaps because he empathized with someone in the same situation. That night, the three were invited by Mitsuru to stay at the residence of the Ruzoji warrior faction. While Tsugumi was rolling around on the mattress, Kojiro and Musashi were standing outside talking to the senior sister, not forgetting to thank her for letting them stay. Before Mitsuru left, Musashi had asked her to help with an important matter. The next morning, the sword testing ceremony was held again for the second time. This time, only Musashi and the Enma Odachi flame demon great sword that he had previously failed to test were present. Everyone hoped that this time he would succeed. Recalling the words of the obsidian goddess, Kojiro had strong faith that this time Musashi wouldn't emit that black light anymore. Tsugumi clasped her hands, praying for her friend's success. Mitsuru explained the rules again to make sure Musashi understood clearly. Musashi called Tsugumi, saying that the things she had said yesterday, he didn't understand much, but Jisai greatly valued the sword and the way of life of a warrior, so from now on, he wanted to know more about the world he was about to enter with his sword. Indeed, those who had passed away were gone forever, but if there was anything they cherished in the relics they left behind, he would also cherish it and not let the evidence of that existence disappear. These words touched everyone's hearts, making Kojiro suddenly remember his father, while Tsugumi remembered her sister. Musashi picked up the sword. A red light shone brilliantly. He had succeeded and also created the red diamond light that all warrior corps wanted to have. Before, only the three of them cared about each other. Now that Musashi had successfully tested the sword, dozens of people rushed over to praise him, creating a bustling atmosphere, completely opposite to when Kojiro had successfully tested his sword. It was understandable. The color of Musashi's soul was a brilliant red that only a few warriors had, while Kojiro's was blue, a color that the majority of warriors possessed. Seeing everyone surrounding and congratulating Musashi, Kojiro felt a little jealous because he lost to Musashi despite having successfully tested his sword 2 days earlier. Musashi approached, wanting to talk about something with Kojiro. As usual, Kojiro still used that playful tone, but when he saw Musashi's serious face, he became more serious as well. The two pulled each other to a deserted place. Musashi asked Kojiro about what he had seen during the sword test and told him about the strange thing that had happened. Musashi had seen Kojiro's father Jisai, and it seemed the obsidian goddess knew him, even giving some puzzling hint. Reflecting on what Jisai had left for Kojiro, the two realized that perhaps Kojiro's late father had connections with a warrior corps outside the small town where they used to live. In another development, Nanao and Shiro were also discussing Jisai, the man considered a sinner of the world who had carried the obsidian goddess with him. According to Shiro, Jisai had been missing for 15 years, and if the goddess had changed hosts, then certainly something had happened that they didn't know about yet. Other warrior corps and Musashi were also packing to withdraw. Only Kojiro sat staring at the vehicle his father had left behind, thinking about the warrior world his father had mentioned. The sunlight was obscured by the ramparts of another warrior corps. It was then that Kojiro stood up, looking up at the sky. The warrior world his father had mentioned was expanding right before his eyes. If they walked the same path, perhaps he would find the answer. While waiting for Kojiro to return from somewhere, Musashi and Tsugumi chatted about him. Suddenly, Kojiro approached, placing a large piece of paper on Tsugumi's head. The two wondered where Kojiro had been for so long. It turned out he had gone to find food and other items, and he reminded the two to find the next destination for their journey. Seeing the large map Kojiro had just bought for the first time, Musashi and Tsugumi's eyes sparkled with curiosity, looking for different locations. When it came time to decide, the two didn't know where to go because the map was too vast. Kojiro stepped forward, the aura of a leader emanating from him. He showed the two where they were and the next direction to go. This time, he seemed to have truly made up his mind. It seemed the three friends had gotten lost in a forest that wasn't on the map. Because they were lost, the two of them quarreled, neither yielding to the other. Seeing the situation wasn't good, Musashi suggested trying to drive the steel rider. Sitting at the wheel, Musashi kept telling the two not to let go of their hands. He went along with them, even though he knew they were about to play some prank to reduce the tension. Following his instinct, Musashi turned around and realized there were 6 arms pushing his vehicle. While Kojiro and Tsugumi were struggling in a demon's cocoon, it was the green Oni octopus jar. Musashi keenly noticed that besides his 2 friends being bound by the demon god, there was another person with a sword protruding out. The demon god opened its mouth and roared in front of Musashi. He drew his blade, assuming a stance ready to fight the demon. Musashi was scanning around, looking for the position of the horn. The demon god suddenly stood up from the water, revealing a jade-green horn. Musashi performed his sword technique. The red light from the Enma Odachi was like a bow and arrow aimed directly at the demon god, then destroyed the horn on its belly, causing the demon god to disappear. After absorbing the demon steel, Musashi quickly ran to check on his 2 teammates. Ensuring that they were okay, Musashi ran to the cocoon with a human arm and sword protruding from it, calling loudly but receiving no response. Musashi didn't give up hope of saving the person. He tore the cocoon wrapper with his bare hands. It turned out inside was a purple-haired girl. The girl opened her golden, sparkling eyes and sat up, looking at the person in front of her. Musashi friendlily extended his hand to help her up, but she pointed at his cheek, indicating where Musashi had been grazed by the demon, causing bleeding. When she learned that wound was from saving her, the girl gently tilted her head and smiled, her golden eyes sparkling like diamonds as she thanked Musashi, making him somewhat moved. Kojiro praised that exquisite beauty. Tsugumi noticed that both of her friends were pretending to be shy when seeing someone of the opposite sex. But it wasn't at all like when they met her. Perhaps in their heads, a garden of flowers had already bloomed. Suddenly hearing someone call princess, all 3 turned around to see an elderly man running toward the girl who had just been called princess. She told him about how Musashi had just saved her and received a mild scolding. Recognizing the noble identity of the girl standing before them, Tsugumi wondered why she was wandering in such a dense forest. The old man introduced her as the daughter of Lord Nobumitsu, the leader of Sarwatari Bushi, under the Usagi alliance, named Sarwatari Mikeru. Their purpose was to join the Great War for domination, and were heading to Haruma Port. To thank Musashi for saving her life, the old man used a luxury steel rider, several times larger than the one Kojiro's father had left behind, to take them out of the forest. While his 2 teammates comfortably admired the surroundings, Musashi observed the face of the girl he had just saved and noticed that her attitude had completely changed from earlier. Unable to continue enduring that unnatural atmosphere, Musashi opened the map, trying to find a topic to talk to the girl, but he was still met with silence. Only his teammates Tsugumi and Kojiro responded. Ignoring Kojiro and Tsugumi's attempts to stop him, Musashi removed the pin and looked at her, expecting an answer. The girl finally moved, but it was just a glance. The old man in front answered for her. Musashi continued to shift to sword techniques to talk, but was still met with that silence. Kojiro and Tsugumi kept changing the subject and interrupting, making Musashi angry, shouting loudly that he was trying to start a conversation with Mikiru. As soon as Mikiru heard Musashi call her name, she was very surprised and asked Musashi to confirm that he really remembered her name, leaving Musashi dumbfounded. Just as the old man warned about shaking, both Musashi and the princess fell out of the vehicle. At the most dangerous moment, the princess drew her sword, emitting a blue sword wheel. She supported Musashi's waist and introduced that she used the demon steel blade Lapis Lazuli Lotus. The first time, the hero saved the beauty. This time, Musashi was the hero being saved by the beauty. Musashi was delighted to find himself flying, not forgetting to turn and praise the friend, making the little girl remember her father's praise when she was able to use the demon steel blade. The 2 continued to chat while flying. The friend apologized for her bad attitude, all because she was someone who only liked to be in her room. Normally, she was only with the old man, so with more people, she felt confused, not knowing how to join the conversation. As she spoke, her face flushed with embarrassment. Musashi recalled her eyes earlier and chuckled, feeling relieved to know she wasn't angry. The little girl smiled and suggested flying with him to the south. Musashi told her about the 3 of them's intention to go east, but she warned against going in that direction. She pointed for Musashi to look eastward. He was surprised by the black wall of the demon god with its oversized dimension. Looking down at his feet, he saw that wall moving and destroying everything in its path. That was the first demon that had entered the beautiful land of the rising sun 150 years ago. The princess told Musashi and the others about the legend of when the demon appeared and how it grew day by day thanks to the minerals that humans offered as tributes. Currently, its size had filled half of Japan's land. That being was called the Black Demon God. The dream of eliminating the Black Demon God to unify Japan was something that no one had been able to do in the past 150 years. But if left unchecked, one day the whole of Japan would be swallowed by it. The old man took the princess to Harima Port first. She didn't forget to turn back to say goodbye and arranged to meet Musashi again someday. The three sat back, looking at the Black Demon God, wondering if Tsugumi's sister and Kojiro's father knew about this demon. But no one had a definite answer. Opening the scroll to look, Tsugumi realized it was a scroll that every warrior corps had. But that obvious truth surprised both Musashi and Kojiro, further confirming that Kojiro's father was also a member of some warrior corps. Tsugumi looked at the seal on the scroll and recognized it as the seal of Lord Usugi. Could it be that Kojiro's father was a person from the Usugi warrior corps at Harima Port? The most magnificent and bustling scene ever appeared. The entire Usugi alliance was gathering here. The corps standing in the center were Arima and Otomo, two famous warrior corps, and here was also the presence of the prestigious family ranked second in the alliance, Shimazu. The leader of the Amako warrior corps reminded everyone of the goal of today's journey and encouraged other members. The inheritance book was also the reward for whoever could get the demon god's core on Awaji Island. On the rooftop, a man with a muscular body and fully tattooed shoulders, long hair with each strand covering his face, was sitting there thinking about the information reported by his subordinate that the obsidian goddess had been discovered. Perhaps they were about to have a meeting. Nanao stepped out of a store, having won many toys and entertainments. The gift box fell from her hand. From her left chest, she felt something moving. A black light emanated. Going to a secluded place, Nanao opened her outer garment. Black minerals grew from her left chest, and 7 black souls appeared. That group of people and the obsidian goddess were the set of 8 obsidian stones buried in the same rock. They urged Nanao to quickly go recover the obsidian goddess. A soul reminded Nanao not to let the obsidian goddess fall into the hands of the warrior corps, otherwise, the compass would point out the direction of the divine weapon. If that happened, the mission to extend the lifespan of the demon god would fail. Kojiro and his 2 teammates on the Steel Rider headed straight to Harima Port. Hearing Tsugumi talk about the sea, Musashi and Kojiro recalled that absurd concept taught in that fraudulent classroom. Kojiro asked his teammates if they thought it was okay to follow his thoughts, but no one objected. On the contrary, they agreed to go with him to learn about his late father. Musashi suddenly smelled something. They had reached the sea.